Public Law 111-254 was signed by President Obama last year.
Madam Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 347, a bill to award the Congressional Gold Medal
in recognition of their exemplary service during the Second World War.
Japanese Americans who came forward to fight for their nation.
The 100th Infantry Battalion.
It's a story of love of country.
42nd Regimental Combat Team.
Of sacrifice.
MIS Nisei.
It's really a remarkable American story.
The Congressional Gold Medal is truly the highest recognition the nation can bestow on an individual or an organization.
The history of the Congressional Gold Medal goes back to the Revolutionary period. The first medal was struck and given to George Washington in 1776.
The criteria is you have to have made a significant contribution to the country's development and history. The 100th, the 442nd MIS, they all exceed the definition. But because this is such a rare distinction, it's very hard to accomplish legislatively.
The House resolution that started the whole process was brought forth by Representative Adam Schiff, who was not a member of the Asian American community.
And he personally buttonholed and grabbed people, House members, and got, the 2/3 of the House members to sign on.
If you can imagine, in the House, 2/3 of the membership, that's nearly 300, would have to sign on as co-sponsors.
MVN was formed in 2009, and the idea was to bring together organizations from 8 different regions of the United States, all who had similar missions and all who had been working in their regional communities to advance the Japanese American World War II soldier legacy.
All of us represented major organizations, national and local. And we were competing for money and attention and everything else that was associated with what we were trying to do.
These are all people from different organizations with different missions, some with different values, and at times there were egos involved. So getting everyone on the same page proved difficult at times.
There was overwhelming support by the Nisei veterans on this legislation. However, there was one glitch in that the original legislation did not include the military intelligence service, the Nisei linguists.
And so one of the topics that we brought to the National Veterans Network organization was, do we want to include the MIS? And you would have thought that it would have been an easy discussion, an easy unanimous yes. But what actually happened...
There are those who were fearful that having to go back and re-include the MIS into the legislation would be time-consuming and problematic.
One of the organizations felt that, we shouldn't include the MIS. It was a letter that I received, and just the content of the letter was really saying, we're losing veterans every day. Why would you change the bill to include the MIS? This time is of the essence.
So there was intenser discussion, I remember, that was had by all parties involved, and it was really the MIS folks who were there. They said, don't worry about us. It's more important to make sure this legislation gets passed for the rest of the Nisei soldiers.
The MIS had not been recognized as much because they couldn't be recognized, right? That this was a military intelligence service. Any information about them was not released until 30, 40 years after the war.
And then many of the sansei in the room said, wait a minute, we need to include the MIS because they're an integral part of the World War II story, the beginning and the end. So we gathered together and voted unanimously to include the MIS story.
Senator Boxer took the lead to make sure that the MIS was included after we had talked to her about the importance of including the military intelligence service. But there was a strategy. It had to be at a point when they knew that it was going to pass the Senate.
If the bill passed the Senate, she would then add an amendment to add the MIS to the bill. It would go back to the House, and then Mr. Schiff would get that amended bill recognizing the 100th, 442, and the MIS through the House and to the President.
When the National Veterans Network got involved, there were only about 28 co-sponsors in the Senate.
In the Senate, Out of 100, 2/3 is 67. 67 minimum have to sign up.
Although the number 67 was relatively small, it's hard to get to a senator. So our role was getting 67 senators to sign on as co-sponsors of the bill.
If it doesn't get accomplished within a 2-year session, you have to start all over again with your very first co-sponsor. So you have kind of a time limit to get the job done.
The process that we came up with was trying to find as many states where we knew people that could get to the senators.
The grassroots strategy involved our organizations, their members, their leadership, to basically contact the Senate office. They had to call them, they had to write letters, they talked to the staff.
One particular senator that I recall visiting with was my own senator, Senator Orrin Hatch from Utah, who knew somewhat about the veterans but wasn't fully aware of what they had done. And with the veterans with us, it was very easy to discuss this with the senator and his staff and to gain their support without any reservation.
I was very pleased to see that one of our senators, Senator Ron Wyden, was one of the first 20 senators to sign on to the bill. We had a little more challenge with our other senator, Jeff Merkley. It took him a while. We actually did a letter writing campaign that we were hoping to bombard his office with letters to support this bill. He did eventually sign on.
I think having the networks that we all had made a big difference too, and enabled us to slog through it like we did.
I mean, our Texas senators signed on. That was Kay Bailey Hutchinson, and I happened to know her through some friends of mine, and also John Cornyn's office. I knew his aide. And so, you know, it was rather simple to tell them about the veterans and that Governor Conley named them all honorary Texans because of the Lost Battalion.
Survivors and families of the trapped Texas Lost Battalion, rescued by the 442nd in France, were eager to help. For example, Forde Collis of Tennessee told his senator, "Over 200 of us were trapped by the Germans. Our division could not save us, but the Nisei did." The survivors of the Lost Battalion and their families were among our strongest supporters.
We had to go to other senators other than our own senators.
And because I was in the Air Force, in the military, I had some pretty good friends in a whole bunch of different states. So I started calling those guys, and then like in Kansas, General Myers, who became the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, he and I grew up in the Air Force together, flying fighters. I called him and I said, "Hey, get on your senator, you know them?" And he says, "Yes, I do." And so he got on the horn, and then Roger Shimamura was the artist in Kansas State. I called Roger, we were high school buddies, and so he said, "Yeah, I'll do." And I don't know who had fooled with what, but both those senators were on board very quickly.
It's actually a two-tiered effort. There's an effort to get the bill passed at the Senate level, and then there's an effort at the grassroots level to contact the senators. So it was a dual effort that was going on. But again, you know, in June 2010, we were at maybe mid-50s. We really needed, 10, 12 more sponsors to go, and it was so hard because by then, we already knew that these senators were holding out.
I think there was a possibility that the Congressional Gold Medal bill was not going to pass in the Senate. And the reason why is at that time, there was a lot of senators out there that did not have any Japanese or Japanese Americans that even lived in their state, let alone have a veteran of Japanese American descent. So what would it be in it for them to actually vote for this bill? I also feel like there was probably racial discrimination that was also a factor in whether or not these senators would vote yes or no.
The challenges were trying to raise national awareness of a generation of legislators that were not aware of the role of the 100th, 442nd, and the Military Intelligence Service. And we had to first make them aware of the military exploits and the achievements of these units and the role of the Nisei linguists during World War II.
There were two things that happened. One is Senator Boxer prepared and circulated a Dear Colleague letter asking for her fellow senators to support the Congressional Gold Medal bill to the 100-442 and MIS. And I think that made a difference. That was something that had to happen simultaneously while the grassroots strategy was going on. And in particular, why that timing was important, it was also at that time that Terry Shima and Grant Ichikawa were walking the halls of Congress.
Grant was with Philip and Terry was with myself, and we really made a great team of the veterans being able to share the personal aspect of why the bill is important. And while Philip and I really talked to the staffers about the business aspect of what we would hope to have their boss co-sponsor the bill.
We followed them. I'm telling you, one day we visited so many senators' office.
They didn't have any time and we were out of time, so it's a matter of trying to grab people's attention. I remember one guy at the front desk, he was about my age, and so my pitch to him was, hey, did your grandfather fight in World War II? And he said yes. And so I said, well, mine did too, and mine was in an internment camp. And I think that caught his attention because the senator supported the bill the next day, but the whole game is, can you get their attention and can you follow up?
The satisfaction and the joy that we saw with Terry, Shima, and Grant, the value that they felt that they gave to this whole process. And as more and more veterans got involved in this process, it became a very family, community-oriented effort that brought a lot of people together.
Having Terry and Grant walk those halls of Congress was critical, and I think really did help us to get to that final stretch. But I also want to recognize that there were other efforts going on. There was just multiple people working on one senator to try to get that senator on board, and that was also happening while Terry and Grant were walking the halls. So I think by mid-June 2010, we were only 5 co-sponsors away. And I remember it was like this excitement and frenzy, and we're in constant contact with Senator Boxer's staff.
It was really an effort that involved so many, including organizations where we had so many veterans actually calling members of the Senate, calling members of the House, and we just kept getting more and more senators on board, and once we got past that magic number of 70, that bill went right through.
When it finally passed, we were just so ecstatic and relieved.
I was thrilled that we got it done, right? And it was great, and all of those wonderful things that you feel when you achieve a remarkable goal.
We had worked for many, many months on getting this passed, and again, a national movement and something that we don't see a lot of in our communities. So to have this happen, and for such a good reason, it was thrilling and really proud that we were able to get this accomplished.
After it was passed in the Senate, it then went to President Obama, and he signed the bill at the White House in the Oval Office on October 5th, 2010.
There are 3 signatures on the bill. One is Speaker Pelosi, the other is Senate President pro tempore Daniel K. Inouye, and the third, President Obama. From the Japanese American point of view and the Asian American point of view, Senator Inouye's signature is, to me, extremely significant and historical. This is the first time that a Japanese American has become President pro tempore of the United States Senate, which constitutionally puts him 4th in line for the presidency of the United States. But equally interesting is that only 70 years ago, this same person was given draft classification 4C, which stood for enemy alien, unfit for military duty.
Once the president signs them, the bill then becomes law and it gets passed to the Mint.
Our work involved dealing with the United States Mint,
regarding the design of the obverse or front side of the medal, representing Nisei soldiers generally, and the design of the reverse side, representing the 100th Battalion 442nd Regimental Combat Team and the Military Intelligence Service specifically.
We had to conduct research on the lineage of the 100th Battalion, the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, and the Military Intelligence Service. While it was easy to find historical facts beyond the 100th Battalion and the 442nd, it was a bit more difficult to find any records and unit insignia of the MIS. But then the U.S. Army Institute of Heraldry was able to help us and design the MIS insignia to be included on the Congressional Gold Medal.
The NVN undertook an effort to get 90 World War II veterans to review 8 reverse and 11 obverse designs submitted to them by the U.S. Mint, because the stakeholders had a vital role to ensure the designs were truly emblematic of the 3 units represented on the medal, and that the veterans approved of the artwork, felt it was appropriate and historically accurate.
At the U.S. Mint's direction, they have said, please look at the helmet, the netting, the straps, the rifle, uniform, their faces. It is extremely important that it's historically accurate, and that's where NVN and the U.S. Mint was involved in ensuring that those details were collaborated on.
And I recall the Mint specifically saying that they wanted input from all the veterans organizations to include the leadership of the current members of the 100th Battalion, 442nd Infantry Regiment in Hawaii. So we gathered the veterans together, showed them all the designs. It was important to the veterans that the picture of the soldiers and the type of rifle was issued to officers, and they were not quite on the front lines. These veterans knew what it was like and what uniforms they wore during World War II. And so the final design truly depicted how they served during World War II.
Then Grant and I appeared before 2 forums, the Citizens Advisory Commission and the Fine Arts Commission, to explain and defend the designs, which contain drawings of Nisei soldiers, the historical facts behind them. Grant made a strong case before the commissions for the Congressional Gold Medal to be approved and minted by the U.S. Mint.
In the end, after additional edits were made based on their review and input, the World War II veterans recommended 3 designs to move forward for further consideration. The Secretary of the Treasury chooses the final design.
We coordinated, synchronized, planned, and executed 5 major events.
A great stroke for us was that we could get honor flight to fly in the veterans for the celebration itself.
That included a ceremony at the World War II Memorial with the Nisei veterans and their family members.
General Peterson and his crew, his colonel, and others that were involved with all of it were great at making sure it happened right.
Replica of the Congressional Gold Medal to the near 1,200 Nisei veterans and families that were represented at the Congressional Gold Medal ceremony.
But the families were so excited to be in Washington, D.C., and we had just this huge group. And my dad's reaction was he was so grateful that finally the Japanese Americans were being recognized.
The presentation of the Congressional Gold Medal itself by the Congress to our Nisei veterans on the Hill.
There were 3 representatives from the Japanese American veterans groups. The first was Mitsuo Ted Hamasu from the 100th. The 442 was represented by Sus Ito, and the MIS was represented by Grant Ichikawa. They were very proud, obviously, but when they saw it, you could see their eyes light up, and obviously were happy to receive it.
A Nisei Veterans Gala in honor of the Nisei veterans and their families, which had over 2,500 in attendance.
As I looked around and saw families very joyful, and you could see and feel the pride that they felt.
And then finally, tours to the Japanese American Memorial to Patriotism during World War II.
I still remember joining a group of my colleagues, veterans, all of them, watching the president sign the gold medal bill. Well, we were all smiling and we're happy looking, but I think all of us must have had some emotional turmoil within us because we knew that what made it possible at that moment were the hundreds of men who gave their lives, who gave their limbs, just so that our nation would recognize that they made a mistake.
The Nisei never wavered in their loyalty to the nation, not even when the nation seemed to question theirs. Their magnificent service in war proved their loyalty beyond any shadow of doubt. In doing so, Nisei soldiers earned the trust of the American people, not just for themselves, but for their families and their communities, and those of us who would be following in their footsteps.
And the medal represents for me some self-satisfaction that when I was a child in elementary school being bullied and having to prove through my dad's blue 442 album that he was in the U.S. Army and he was an American citizen. And, you know, they shouldn't bully me like this. I used to take his book to show and tell. And so for me, it was a huge day. It was a huge opportunity to say, look, these guys were fabulous.
Seeing the Congressional Gold Medal in the case and the stories around it, and it is a story that has to constantly be told. Because one thing we know, I think, is that if we don't learn from our past, chances are we'll repeat those same mistakes. So this is not something that you put away in the attic.
The work that NVN has done, I see how they have influenced and participated and created sort of a roadmap for the Filipino Congressional Medal, as well as the Chinese American Congressional Medal, which was just awarded last year. And without NVN paving the way for those other organizations, I think that the work that they've done, not only getting the legislation, but creating traveling exhibitions, educational materials, teacher materials, are all things that will go into helping to continue to tell the stories of Asian Americans in the United States and their contributions to our history.
It was a real high point for us to see the Congressional Gold Medal as well as the Nisei soldier experience and their objects and artifacts displayed in the National Museum of the U.S. Army.
These past few years have been very difficult for Asian Americans, for Japanese Americans, for Americans who've been discriminated against. And with all of the anti-Asian hate crime that's happened over the last 2.5 years because of the pandemic, a lot of people talk about the internment and talk about the discrimination that Japanese Americans faced. They raise the heroism of Japanese American veterans. And so the story is still extremely important.
It was like this awakening that, you know, our work is really not done. Actually, it was almost shocking to realize that this country still saw Asian Americans as perpetual foreigners.
In the context of anti-Asian violence during this pandemic, where we often see Asians as victims, in this light, we see them as heroes, as champions for freedom and liberty.
I think that the work that the MVN is doing with the veterans and the Congressional Gold Medal will hopefully be able to educate people. We are all Americans, no matter the color of our skin, and that it really is all about our values and beliefs.
Well, this is an American story of loyalty, heroism, sacrifice, steadfastness, and the belief that American citizenship was both a birthright and their most precious possession. They won in combat, and they defeated prejudice here at home that had been heaped on their loved ones. We may never see another example like this one of what it takes and what it means to be an American.
Hello everyone, my name is Ann Baba Newman. I am the daughter of Robert Masao Baba, who served as a medic in Italy with the 442nd towards the end of the war. The Congressional Gold Medal meant so much to my father. He had tears coming down his cheeks when I met him after the ceremony. He said, "They said such nice things about my unit." That recognition meant a lot to my father because he and a lot of our other vets still faced intense anti-Japanese sentiment after the war in spite of their honorable service record. I remember as a child, some children on the playground couldn't believe my father was in the American Army. Well, he was, and he and all our veterans not only did their duty, they did it very well, very honorably. I am so happy to have this link through my father to this very important part of our history. I'm proud of all our veterans.
I'm Joanne Sakai, and 10 years ago, I traveled with my father, Lawson Sakai, an E Company veteran, to the Congressional Gold Medal events in D.C. For Dad, this was a can't-miss opportunity, not only to bask in the long-delayed recognition of the role that Nisei soldiers played in World War II, but also the opportunity to visit with so many of his fellow veterans and others with whom he had traveled so often back to the Vosges Mountains in France, where the local residents famously celebrate annually their liberation from German occupation by the Nisei soldiers, whom they fondly call the Hawaiians. I know that if Dad were still alive, he would have done everything in his power and our power to be there with you for this commemoration.
Yazawa. I'm an Army Reservist. I used to be with the 100th Battalion, 442nd Infantry Regiment, U.S. Army Reserve, as its battalion surgeon, and I had the honor to attend the Congressional Gold Medal as ceremony in Washington, D.C. as a physician, and it just so happens that I'm a geriatric specialist, so it was fitting that I was able to help watch over these veterans who, for many of them who served in the 100th Battalion, 442nd Infantry Regiment, MIS, and others. They were role models for me, and as I was growing up, I read their stories, and they inspired me to attend the United States Military Academy at West Point, and where there are very few Japanese Americans that go into the military these days, much less West Point. But the few that we did have, most came from Hawaii, and I have to say that we were probably all inspired by the stories of the veterans that were present at the Congressional Gold Medal. So it was quite an honor. My father, my wife's grandfather, is an original member of the 100th Battalion, so that made that especially sweet. And for my wife, who also was in attendance, in fact, her grandfather, Jack, is who we named our son after. Our son is named Jack after his grandfather, who served in the 100th Battalion and really set the tone for the family values and sort of culture that exists in my wife's family.
I'm Janie Iwamoto, and I'm from Salt Lake City, Utah. For me, being there in that moment was something that I can't explain really, but I know for our veterans, it was the hope of America that they believed in so much and sacrificed so much for all of us. And I think that hope of America was really fulfilled that day. It was not just a ceremony for all of us and for the veterans. I think it was a moment where everyone came together and our government acknowledged their sacrifices and past wrongs that were righted for that moment in time. And I think that was the most important thing, that it wasn't just a ceremony, it was the hope of America, what it could be, and what it was that day, that everyone came together to honor these amazing, amazing individuals. And as a group, what they did for us, for all of us, for the United States and everyone.
My name is Patty Doyle, and I am from Minnesota. I attended the Congressional Gold Medal ceremony with my dad, Harry Fukusawa, and my sister Carol Nakatsui and her son Matthias. I have two really special memories from that time in Washington, D.C. The first was just having the opportunity to be there and being able to see my dad receive the Bronze Star Medal. The second actually came after the ceremony when we went up to his room, and for the very first time, and I'm not sure exactly what prompted it, but he started sharing about his own wartime experience. And we found out that he was a medic. And when we asked him, well, did you ever have to end up shooting at anyone? He said he didn't, but that he sure was shot at. The ceremony, all events surrounding it were very special to my dad. And I am really grateful that I was able to be there with him. He passed away just 19 months afterwards.